Welcome to the Hangry Games Arena, where Kelly Brewster, the author of What's Eating You and host of the Hangry Games, is shaking up the weight loss world. She's providing you with tons of resources and helpful tips to obtain your long-term wellness and weight loss goals once and for all. The Hangry Games is recorded and produced at Open Space Studios.
What is up, Hangry Game Nation? I pray that you guys have had a great week so far, and you've worked on, I'm hoping, some of those take-homes that we actually talked about from last week. Did you? Because every week I'm going to hound in on that. I'm going to ask you if you've done the work, done the homework. I want this to be an interactive opportunity for you. I don't want this to be just any old podcast. I want you to say, okay, Kelly gave me this, and this I need to work on. And then really implement some of those strategies and those tips. I want you, excuse the pun, I want you to sink your teeth in this so that you can really walk away with some applicable things that can help you during the course of the week, right? I mean, that's what it's about. If you can't get something out of it, then at the end of the day, I hope I've entertained you, if anything else. It's been a busy week. We've had a really busy week in our clinic this week. I've seen a lot of patients, but it's been good. We've had a lot of fun. We've had a lot of great feedback from our viewers and our listeners. And thank you guys so much for tuning in and just kind of giving us some feedback. I really appreciate that because it does help us. If there's anything from weight loss and wellness that you guys want to really kind of talk about or cover, please put some comments in on that YouTube or put some comments in on Spotify, iHeart, Podbean, Apple Radio, any of those things. Put some comments so that we really can start putting some things out there that interest you as well. So what's on the docket today, Kelly? What are we going to be talking about today? So I'm so glad you asked. Today we're going to talk about calories. We're going to talk about that old adage, is a calorie just a calorie that's just a calorie? Are they all created equal? Can I eat like ding dongs every day if I just eat like 1,200 calories and still lose weight? You may lose a few pounds, but you're surely going to look like a ding dong, but that's for another day. But we are going to talk a little bit about, just kind of dive into this topic. And I hope it's going to give you a better understanding about what you're trying to focus on when it comes to your eating plan. And more importantly, the things that I'm consuming, are they really good for me? Now, last week, we talked about the best diets according to the U.S. News, the top 25, and we walked away with what? The best diet according to the Hangry Games Nation is the one that you can sustain for long-term wellness and weight loss. The one that you can incorporate into your current lifestyle and sustain for a significant period of time. Now, several of the eating plans we talked about last week were structured. They had like Weight Watchers, Optavia, MyFitnessPal, Lose It. They all have apps that had mechanisms. Not all of them had apps, but the ones that had apps, they have mechanisms for weight loss, and they help you to provide calorie restriction with a decent amount of success. But it really got me to thinking. I'm like, okay, but do they actually know what a calorie is? And better yet, do they understand the differences between the different types of calories? And so I really started thinking about that. And I'm like, you know what? In order to really equip you with everything that you need, the best way to create a level of success and a foundation for success is to gain understanding. So today, what we're going to talk about a little bit is we're going to talk about the different types of calories that are out there so that you know why proteins are more important than fats and carbs. And we'll go into that a little bit further. So today we're going to talk about calories, the different types, which I just said. We're going to talk about our bodies being very much like a checkbook, how we want to keep that body checkbook overdrawn. And then we're going to close out with, you guessed it, some takeaways. Now, technically, I want to start off by saying that all calories, okay, my nose is itching a little bit, that all calories have the same amount of energy. Now, some of what I'm going to talk about today is going to resonate a little bit like and be as clear as mud, okay? But bear with me because I do think at the end it's going to make a little bit of sense to you. So all calories have the same amount of energy. And what that means is 1 calorie has the equivalent of 4,184 joules of energy. Now, no, you are not going to have a test question at the end of the week or at the end of the podcast about this. That's all you need to know about it. So, so when you talk about that in respect to calories, yes, a calorie is sort of correct. But when it comes to our body and the mechanisms for processing calories, it's not that simple. So let's talk cars first. Okay, so there's cars, right? In general, there's cars. Let's say that's calories, right? And then there are Lamborghinis, there's Toyotas, there's hot rods, and then there's the gas guzzlers, right? That are laying on the last leg and they're almost ready to hit the farm. Well, they're all cars, right? But they perform very differently. How they burn gas differs. Some are super efficient. Some have great miles per gallon for gas, while others, like the hot rods and your race cars, they burn diesel like we breathe air. I mean, they literally go through tons of that immediately, right? My point here is that a calorie is kind of a fuel, but each type of calorie requires more energy from your body to use it, while others actually come in a ready form and you just literally absorb it. Okay. So if you haven't figured it out yet, the human body is a very complex system with a lot of intricate processes in it, and it regulates the energy and how it all stays balanced. Now, think of it like this. I live in one parish. Okay. I know I'm in Louisiana, so we have parishes, right? They're getting ready to have a parade right now. I had to drive around to get here just because of all the stuff going on. But I live in a parish and I work in Covington, but I live in Abita. And this is all in the same parish, same body, right? But there may be like 3 or 4 different ways for me to get home. And some of those ways are actually more efficient than others. The other caveat here is that getting home with a high performance car is going to be far more efficient than me trying to ride a bike home. Okay. I don't live 5 minutes from my job. I live about 20 minutes driving. So you can imagine a bike for me. Yes, I would look amazing, but that would be a very difficult thing to do. And it would be very tiring. The point being is that if we related this a little bit to calories, different foods go through different pathways to provide a mechanism to provide an energy or produce, an energy for your body. Okay. Now, again, some are more efficient than others. So what we eat really does have a huge impact on these processes. And in turn, it can affect our hunger and even our eating behaviors. So in the What's Eating You book, when we were developing our plan for success, we talked about the choices of diets and what you'll implement. And what I tried to relay in the book was the choice of diet that you made was not as important as understanding the different calories and those food groups so that you can determine what's the best plan for your health and, of course, your lifestyle. Now, let's go back to calories, okay? So there are technically 4 different types of calorie groups, but most of us are familiar with 3 of them. Proteins, carbohydrates, and fats are the 3 that most people are actually aware of. Now, the 4th one, which most people are familiar with, but they're not aware that it's actually a calorie, is alcohol. It is considered a calorie. However, what I'm telling you is this one is dead in the water, okay? It literally has 0 nutritional value or contribution to the body, and it combusts like very easily without very little effort. I have an analogy for this, and I haven't eaten this in a long time, but if you order at some of the very nice restaurants in New Orleans, I haven't been in a long time, but you can order bananas Foster flambe. And what that is they actually prepare the meal at the table side. And what they do is they put alcohol in it and they light that puppy up. And it's like, whoop, it's this big old fire. And it basically what it does is it burns off the alcohol, but it creates a lot of flavor to the dish. But the alcohol burns immediately. It combusts immediately. There is nothing in it that has to break down in order for you to utilize it as an energy. So to be honest with you, when I'm talking to my patients in the clinic, I literally will tell them, if we have a discussion and they tell me that they do drink a significant amount of alcohol, I'm like, look, you got to know that number one, that has no nutritional value. Number two, it's like a liquid Snicker bar. And quite frankly, if I'm going to want an unwanted sugar or a processed sugar, it's going to be at the hands of like Hershey's, Mars, or Nestle. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be coming from them. That's all I'm saying, okay? For the sake of today's podcast, I'm going to talk about the other 3 calories, and hands down, the most important. We're going to start with the fats. We're going to finish up with the carbs and then close out with the proteins. And these are all considered macronutrients. However, before I actually jump into each of these calorie categories, I kind of feel like Alec Trebek, like the calorie categories for today are, we need to talk about the thermal effect, or the thermal requirement that enables us to use those specific pathways to get the food through the body and eventually for us to use it as an energy source. And sometimes our body requires, in order for the body to burn energy, it needs a fuel, okay? But sometimes what we eat needs a fuel too. And that's going to make sense a little bit later on, right? Clear as mud. I told you that it would be. All right. So let me just give you an example of this, because I know I'm talking about thermal effects and you're like, I don't really get it, Kelly. Okay. So for example, proteins contain 4 calories per gram, but a large part of this calorie is just needed to produce the heat to metabolize the actual food, which leaves very little to be used for other things. So from a thermal effect, protein is at about 25%, whereas fat only comes in at around 2%. So if we did some Common Core math here, let's break that down for you. If I had 100 calories of protein and 100 calories of fat, once I've used that 100 calories of protein to heat the body up so that I can break it down, I'm only going to have 75 calories of protein. But for the fat, I'm still going to have 98 calories left, which means I've got more opportunity to store as a fat. So the more energy it takes for the body to just digest, just to break it down so our body can even recognize it, the less you will store the calorie. Now, a side note here is that like whole foods that you eat require far more energy to digest than processed foods. Like, let me give you an example. A whole apple requires far more energy to break down than a Hubix apple pie. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Am I hitting a nerve? That's okay. It's okay if I hit a nerve, right? Okay. Fats are kind of a gray area, except when they're located in your stomach or, if they're in your rear. What I mean by that is they're usually found in foods, but we don't go to a restaurant and say, yes, I would like to have the fried fat with a little bit of broccoli or side veggies on the side. No, we don't order fat. We may, I like pork belly, which is a little bit of fat, but okay, let's stop. We're not going there. Okay. So fats are broken down into different saturations or forms. And I'm really not going to go down that particular rabbit hole today, but what I am going to say is that fats are in butters, they're in oils, they're in some nuts, some meats like beef and bacon and pork, some fish like cold water fish, and even dairy products and stuff. Each of these calories possesses the ability to provide energy. However, fat, again, provides very little energy to burn. So what that means is you're going to store more of them. Now, if we go back to that thermal effect of food, this only comes in at 2 to 3% use of your body's energy to digest. So my body's only going to need to use about 2 to 3% force to break that down to digest. So we're going to wind up actually absorbing the rest of that. And then, of course, if you decided to use, let's say, like a high fat keto diet or a high carb diet, it's only going to increase the metabolic demand by 4 to 8%. Whereas if you try to do a higher protein diet, it's going to come in at around 11 to 14%. So sometimes as high as 25, like we said earlier, depending on the type of protein you eat. So really on fats, you want to eat good, healthy fats that are going to be low. Like this is what I tell my patients all the time. Stay away from the F foods: fried, fatty, fast. That covers a lot of the foods that have the bad fats in it, and that's really just going to help you to kind of steer away from them. So let's move on to the carbohydrates. These are our yummy, yummy, yummy in our tummy foods. We love carbs. These are essentially like your breads, your cereals, grains, some legumes, fruits and vegetables. Legumes are like your beans and stuff. And you may know them also as these far too familiar things such as rice, pasta, potatoes, bread, sweets, mac and cheese, potato chips, cheesecake. I know at this point I've got to be hitting a nerve, right? When you want to talk about carbohydrates, there are good whole food carbohydrates, and then there are the simple or processed carbohydrates. I always say that, back in the day, in the caveman days, they were cavemen. They had to fight for their food. Back in the day when our grandparents they were out in the garden. They were working the garden. They were killing their own food. There was like a predator diet. Whereas now I do feel like a lot of the foods that we consume are in cardboard. So I call us cardboard eaters now. So, and if you'll notice, and this is all freebies. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but it can be helpful. Okay. Notice what the grocery stores do. Your good whole foods, your proteins, your good dairies, all the things that I want to encourage you to implement into your eating and exercise, into your eating plan, they're located all along the perimeter of the grocery store. All of the cardboard, all of the processed food, when they're in a cardboard box, the company that manufactured that did all the work for you. You do nothing. You just simply absorb it. So most dietitians will actually talk to you, when they talk to you about carbohydrates, they will refer to what's called a glycemic index for foods, or a glycemic load. Now, what this is how quickly and how much the blood sugar will rise or increase in the body when the food is consumed. When the blood sugar rises in the blood, it triggers the production of insulin, which affects the energy metabolism and how we store our fats, or the excess fats. Understand that high blood sugar will make your body want to store excess fats as the excess energy as a fat, because it will require more insulin for the process. Processed carbohydrates will make they peak like very suddenly. So when you eat, like, let's pick on our ding dongs again. You eat the ding dongs, your blood sugar goes really high up. It peaks. It will cause you, all of a sudden, the insulin demand goes up. The insulin goes up. The blood sugar comes boom right back down. And then you're like, okay, now I'm feeling the crash. And what do I want to do? Go back to the pantry for an encore, right? So refined carbohydrates, literally, believe this or not, I think this is amazing. Refined carbohydrates literally light up a part in your brain. Ironically, it's the reward center. Go figure, right? And when you're eating a high glycemic food, it's highlighting pleasure, and it's the addictive effect of food. Gosh, right? I mean, really, come on. This is like enter the emotional monster, right? Here's what I want you to walk away remembering. Refined carbohydrates are bad, okay? Sodas, sugary snacks, white rice, white bread, and they lead to storing more of the energy into a fat. Now, there are some really great carbohydrates out there that do have low glycemic indexes, and they are high in fiber, like berries, whole grains, beans such as lentils, quinoa, which is a type of grain, and some carbs like sweet potatoes and even butternut squash. Although they may have a little bit higher glycemic index because of the high fiber content in those particular items, that ton of fiber, your body now has to work again just to break it down so that you can even use it as an energy. So you actually can fill up a little bit faster, and it requires more for the heat, for the energy, and so you'll have less. You'll also feel fuller, and you've not eaten as many calories as well. Also remember that cutting down the refined carbohydrates, the ones that Elf likes from the movie Elf, he likes Cokes and candy canes and spaghetti, pasta, or sweets. They can have an absolute, if you can reduce these, they can have an absolute positive effect on weight loss, but just by eliminating them. And if you can add just a little bit of carbs, like some fruits and some vegetables, it can actually have the opposite effect. It can actually help you if you start adding some of those. And of course, if you try to take some of that away, it obviously can have a negative effect. So the last on the list is the protein. This is going to be your poultry, which is all your chicken and duck and things like that, beef, pork, seafood, nuts and soy, like tofu, eggs, those kind of things are proteins. Although there are some fats in these foods, these, my friend, are super dense from a molecular standpoint. They're just heavy, right? And so it takes tons of energy to break down these guys just to simply use it as an energy. Now, let's put it this way. Protein actually stokes the fire, okay, for weight loss. Think of it from that perspective, because your body has to work so hard to just break that molecule down. It's stoking a fire to break it down so you don't have very much left. Well, guess what you need to do? I got to go to the reserves and I got to pull some out here or here, right? Of course. So it takes a lot of heat to metabolize and you have very little to store for later. Now, some studies have shown diets that are high in protein can boost your metabolism by 80 to 100 calories a day compared to lower protein diets. Simply put, protein has a metabolic advantage really to other calories, hands down. Now, an easy demonstration here is if I took, and I don't have it here today, but if you took 4 ounces of steak or meat or something like that, and you put it right upside 4 ounces of bread, what you're going to see is likely that 4 ounces of meat is going to be like the palm of my hand. It's going to be very small, but it's going to be very dense. It's still 4 ounces. So 4 ounces is 4 ounces. It doesn't matter, right? That's the same weight. But the bread is going to take up more space. But it's going to be lighter, okay? And a lot of times we can eat a lot more of that than we can of that dense molecule. And so that just fills you up a whole lot quicker, right? So because protein is denser, you're basically getting tired quicker, right? Eating protein, killing the appetite, and you actually can wind up really eating fewer calories when it's really all said and done. Now, one study did show that people that increased their protein intake by 30% of total calorie intake ate 441 fewer calories a day, and they lost 11 pounds in 12 weeks. So this is no joke, guys. This does work, but you do have to stick with it. From a fullness or a saturation standpoint, it's the truth, but it's so easy to eat 500 calories of ice cream, right? I mean, really, it's so easy. But I would challenge you this week, try to eat 500 calories of broccoli or Brussels sprouts or cabbage. Hello, that's a lot. You are going to burn yourself out, but you still haven't gotten to your 500 calories, but it has filled you up. So those type of fibers, those type of calories are going to be far better from you from a saturation and a fullness standpoint. Just some side notes here. When I was developing the prep for a 6-week starter course, we did try to focus and develop the plan and the recipes with high protein, low carbs, and fats. And we really wanted to use a lot more whole foods as much as possible. Why? Why did I want to structure it that way? Not only does the protein, going back to what we talked about just a second ago, require more thermal energy just to digest, but the whole foods take more fuel because there's a lot of fiber and you got to do a lot to break them down. And when you do all of this, it creates a more efficient eating plan for long-term wellness and weight loss. So there's so much energy expended on the consumption itself that you have very little to use through the course of the day, which means you need to go to your reserves. And we know where they're located, right? They're in your midsection, or you literally could be sitting on your reserves right now. So one last thing here. We talked earlier about the body's checkbook. That's one of the things I said we were going to talk about. So I want to spend just a few minutes on why the amount of calories you consume plays an extremely important role in weight loss. Now, typically, I don't know if anybody really balances their checkbook anymore, because you can get on the apps now and you can have immediate balances and stuff. So you kind of almost, I know a lot of times I'll do it in my head a little bit, but what you do want to do is make sure that you have more in the checkbook going in, right, than actually coming out. Why? Because you don't want to be broke, people, right? You don't want to be broke. Nobody does. You don't want to live on the edge of your seat waiting for the next paycheck in a cold sweat, right? No. So you budget, right? So, well, I'm hoping that you do anyway, but we are going to do the absolute opposite when it comes to working on your wellness and weight loss. I always tell my patients, this is something that comes up often. I'll say, look, you can't eat like Michael Phelps if you don't swim like Michael Phelps. Now, to give you an idea of the daily consumption that he was eating when he was in full training for the Olympics, he would eat on a daily basis between 8,000 and 10,000 calories a day. And he was very thin and very fit. He was a high performance athlete, but he was eating great foods. He was eating foods that were having to fight to break down. He kept himself very lean, but he was eating a lot of calories because his checkbook was shoveling out that energy through all of the physical activity that he was doing. So if you're not working out like Michael Phelps, you really can't eat like him. Now, I usually will tell my patients that if you do want to obtain some form of weight loss, you don't really want to go above 1,200 calories a day, and you want to have about 2 to 3 days a week, about 30 minutes of physical activity. And obviously, depending on what you're wanting to achieve, that may look a little bit different from person to person. But overall, from a weight loss perspective, that would be a great place to start. Now, we're going to have an entire episode down the line on exercise, but I think that'll probably about cover it for now. But this is what I want to reiterate to you, and that I want you to keep in mind. I want fewer calories going into your body checkbook than what your body is expending on a daily basis. Okay. And if you do that, then you are going to see overall wellness and weight loss down the line. So I know I feel like it was kind of a quick one, but it was a lot of information. It was a lot of dense, excuse the pun, but a lot of dense information. So we do have some takeaways. You're always going to have the takeaways. Come on now. I want you to know what you're putting in your body, understand the difference between whole and processed foods, and focus on the calories that require more work to just get them ready to digest. We really have a plethora of information in our free workbook on the prepforit.com website. It's got a list of all the proteins, carbohydrates, and fats so that it can help you to make differentiating this a little bit easier for you. Can I say something? Use the tools, people. There are if you don't like the tools that I have out there, that's okay. Use the tools. The tools only work if you pick them up and you apply them. If I don't use it, it's not doing anything. It's not going anywhere, and neither will you, right? So we have plenty of lists out there. Make sure to educate yourself. So homework for this week is kind of easy. I just need you to do that. And if you want to maybe do some journaling and just see what kind of calories you're consuming, I think that would also be helpful as well. It does make a difference because if you don't glass check yourself, and we'll have conversations about that in the future as well. But if you don't glass check yourself, like in hockey, when they just shove somebody up against the glass, and you don't provide that accountability to yourself, then how do you know that you're on the right track, right? So maybe just take a little time this week, journal some of the calories that you've been consuming, and let's see where they fall. Do you have a lot of refined carbs in your diet, a lot of convenience in your diet? Well, then that's probably where we need to start working on. If we go back to our episode last week, hey, one small step can make a really big difference, right? All right. So next week, so first of all, thank you guys so much. This has been a whole lot of fun, but I am so excited about next week. So HD Nation, let me tell you something. Do yourself a favor. Invite some friends to tune in to next week because I have a treat for you. We are getting ready to take our best shot. That's right. We are going to talk about weight loss medications and what is this shot that everybody is talking about really all about, right? You're not going to want to miss this, okay? It's been a pleasure. I enjoy hanging out with you guys so much. Just remember, may the odds always be in your favor.